Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. I wanted to post a quick video right when I'm in the midst of some stuff because I'm dealing with an Omnipod error. And I think it's something that I wish I didn't have to go through it, but honestly, I'm glad that I did when it was under somewhat controlled circumstances because now at least I have an idea of what to do in case this happens again to me. And also I thought kind of immediately that it would be helpful to explain to everybody else in case this happens to you because it can be incredibly frustrating and a little bit scary. So just briefly, so what happened was I was driving. I was actually on my way to a Metallica concert tonight. It's Friday, August 4th, I guess, and Metallica was playing at MetLife Stadium. So it's about an hour drive for me. So I was heading up there, and I noticed that my blood sugar was rising like crazy. I thought maybe it was like excitement for the concert or something like that, but it was kind of climbing. It started off at like I left for the trip and I was at 110 or something like that, and it just kept going up. And eventually, I found myself at like 210, and I had been giving myself corrections the whole time. And eventually, I give myself another correction on the Omnipod PDM. It does that error where you might see like it's not necessarily an error. It'll have a pop-up that says no pod communication, and you can like either check status or deactivate pod. And so I continue to press check status because I don't want to deactivate pod. I want to just check the status and hopefully it resets. So I did that a few times. It didn't work. And then I actually turned the PDM off and on again, which in the past has resolved those sort of issues for me. However, when I did that, I instead was given a prompt with like a big red triangle and this brutal beeping sound. And I took a screenshot of the error on my actual phone. It said Omnipod 5 memory corruption, remove pod now, call customer care. I don't know. This is probably not the easiest thing to see, but if this is the error that I got, it was associated with like a really loud beeping thing. So long story short, I was not able to use my pod. Now, it was scary because the only option that I had, according to the PDM, was to it basically said, I don't know the correct wording, but I had to reset my pod or my whole PDM, which I have never done before. And I was nervous to do it. And I was just incredibly frustrated. So I headed home frantically because my blood sugar was also really high. I took a walk on the way home just to get my blood sugar under control because I couldn't give myself any insulin. And I called the Omnipod support. It really was going kind of a little too slow for me. I was kind of not frantic, but I was like anxious to get information on how to reset my settings. And they were kind of trying to get me to opt into different text message things and stuff like that. I was like, this is weird. So I thought to myself, okay, well, I had Gluco. So maybe Gluco would have my settings, because the one thing that I was told by the customer care rep was that, yeah, you do indeed need to start from scratch and enter the settings into your PDM as if it's a new system, as if you just received the Omnipod 5. And so I wanted to just kind of step through that process with you all, and I'll do a little bit of screen sharing, just so, again, in case you're in the situation, you know what to do. Now, the one thing that I can't show you, and that I'm just recommending that you have handy in case this ever happens to you, is have your Omnipod username and ID. This is a little confusing because, and I'm just clicking around here, so if you see me looking all over the place, I'm looking at my notes. You have like a couple of different login accounts when you make Omnipod. Like you have like the Pod Central account, which is like your website login information. That is not the information that you need. You actually need like your Omnipod ID. So for me, it was, I don't know, I hadn't labeled it properly in my notes, so I wasn't sure what it was. So I had to get home and look at it. But that's something that if your pod is working currently, I would recommend just make sure you go to your settings and check out what it is, or even call customer support to ensure that you have that stuff written down. Because when you do need to reset your pod, that's the first thing you're going to need to even start the reset process. Now, assuming you were able to log into your pod, it's going to immediately bring you to like the basal setup, and then it's going to step you through your bolus, your correction ratios, or your correction factors, and all that kind of stuff. And if you didn't write this down on a piece of paper, or you just didn't know it offhand, it can be incredibly scary because you really don't know what you were doing. Since the system is quite automated. So with that said, thankfully, Gluco does in fact keep a record of that. And everybody that makes an Omnipod 5 account should also have a Gluco account. So that's another thing. First step, get your Omnipod ID information squared away, and then also make sure you have your Gluco information. So let me just share my screen real quick. And I'm going to show Gluco accounts. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen here. So once we log into Gluco, I believe you are going to click on, I just want to click on this to make sure I'm sharing properly. You're going to click on devices. So when you click on devices, you're going to see a list of devices. The one that you actually want from your My Devices tab is the Insulet OmniPod 5 system. So this was a lifesaver. So when you come here, you're going to see at a glance all of your basal rates, your insulin to carb ratios, your insulin sensitivity factors, your correction factors, your blood glucose target range. And then if you click over, so the tab I was just looking at is called pump profiles. You also can click on device settings. That's going to have whatever you set up as your insulin duration action, your max basal rates, and your minimum calculations for bolus settings, along with your max bolus. So this information is vital. If you have this and you become prompted with the menus that require you to reset your Omnipod, I would recommend strongly first that you call your doctor and you ensure that all of this is accurate. But for me, and I can't, obviously you have to be careful with what you recommend to people, but what I did is I stepped through this because I knew that these were my actual settings from yesterday. And so I went through and I set this up to be exactly what it is that you see on the screen here. So now we'll see, because I literally just did this and my Omnipod is still limited because it's trying to connect to my transmitter. But all of my settings have now been recreated to exactly what they were as of yesterday. And so I'm hopeful that this doesn't happen again and that I'm kind of okay for the future and for the rest of today, that, I don't have to worry about anything weird. But having gone through this, it's a little bit frantic, especially if your blood sugar is in a bad spot. You want to get it fixed as quickly as possible. And so, I think you want to have, like I said, just to recap, you want to have the login information for your Omnipod account. You want to have the login information for your Gluco account. You definitely want to have your doctor's contact information, because that's probably the first step that anybody should do, is to explain that this has happened and just to confirm, because your doctor should have access to all of this stuff too. And so I guess if it was working hours or if you had an emergency number, they in theory would be able to log into this as well and see the numbers that you had to confirm. Because I think my experience, and I'm guessing with many of you, was when we first set the Omnipod up, it was with the help of either an in-person rep at your doctor's office, or in my case, I did it over Zoom with somebody from Omnipod. So this time I did it by myself. I felt comfortable doing it. But again, it's probably best to talk to your doctor, but this is where the information is. So I guess just rest assured that the information is here in case you do need it. Unfortunately, I don't really think there was a better way to do this. Once it breaks and it requires a reset, you're going to have to change the pod. So I had, unfortunately, just put a fresh pod on my leg yesterday, so that got wasted. But they are sending me a new pod. At least that doesn't count for the insulin, but it's better than nothing. And yeah, this is not an experience that anybody wants to go through, but I think it's important to be prepared if it does. And hopefully these steps give you some things to plan for and be in a prepared position to deal with in case it ever happens. And so yeah, that's the experience, and that's kind of what my resolution was. Feel free to post any comments if you have questions about anything, and hopefully this is helpful.